It's a Tuesday night. Your dad is sitting at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a calculator. You're maybe 12 years old, doing homework on the couch. The house is quiet. You can hear the clicking of the calculator buttons. He's been there for 2 hours. He doesn't look stressed. He looks focused, like a general planning a campaign. There are papers spread out in front of him, bank statements, mortgage documents, a folder labeled retirement in his own handwriting. You don't know what all of it means, but you know, the way kids always know without being told, that this is serious, that this is how adults survive, that this is what responsibility looks like. Years later, you realize what he was doing. He was fortifying. He was building walls. He was planning for every possible disaster because he'd already lived through a few. He was doing what his entire generation learned to do. Protect everything, trust no one, prepare for the worst. And here's the thing, it worked. It genuinely worked for decades. But your dad is 61 now, and his walls are so high he can't see over them anymore. He has more money saved than he'll probably spend in his lifetime, but he still wakes up at 3 a.m. worried about losing it. He still clips coupons. He still drives the same 14-year-old truck, even though it needs a new transmission, and he could write a check for a new one tomorrow without blinking. He turned down a trip to Portugal last year, something his best friend had been planning for 2 years because it felt irresponsible. He said he'd go next year. His friend went without him, and there may not be a next year for that trip. There may not be a next year for a lot of things. The walls saved him. But now the walls are the problem. Welcome, I'm John, and today we're going back to Generation X, the most financially misunderstood generation in modern history. We talked about why they are the way they are. We talked about the trauma, the layoffs, the 2008 collapse, the pension betrayals, the whole painful story. We talked about their brilliance, and I meant every word. But brilliant people have blind spots too. And today we're going to look at the ones nobody talks about. Not to shame them, not to tear down what they built, but because understanding a blind spot is the only way to stop it from quietly costing you the life you worked so hard to protect. If you're Gen X, this might sting a little. That means it's working. Stay with me. Let's start with the most uncomfortable truth, the one hiding behind all the discipline and the spreadsheets and the emergency funds. The armor works so well that they forgot they're still wearing it. Every single survival habit Gen X developed was a rational response to real pain. The obsessive saving, rational. The multiple income streams, rational. The refusal to trust institutions, rational. The paper records, rational. But here's what happens when you spend 30 years operating from survival mode. The behavior calcifies. It stops being a choice and becomes a reflex. And reflexes don't ask whether the situation is changed. They just fire. So you get a 58-year-old man with $900,000 in his retirement account who genuinely, honestly, with a straight face, tells his son he can't afford to help with a $5,000 emergency. Not won't, can't. Because in his nervous system, those two words have become the same thing. His brain, wired in the worst economic moments of his life, cannot distinguish between the feeling of financial danger and the reality of financial danger. He feels poor, regardless of what the numbers say. And because he spent 30 years trusting his instincts over everything else, over advisors, over data, over other people's opinions, he trusts that feeling implicitly. That right there is financial trauma running the show, and the terrifying part is it feels exactly like wisdom from the inside. Behavioral economists and financial therapists, and yes, financial therapy is a real field that Gen X desperately needs to discover, call this money fog. It's when your emotional history permanently clouds your ability to read your actual present-day financial situation accurately. You have data, you have the spreadsheet, you have the number, but your gut keeps saying it's not enough, it's not safe, don't move, don't trust it, don't relax. And Gen X, more than any other generation, was trained to trust the gut over everything else. The practical cost of this is enormous and underreported. Gen X retirees and near retirees are sitting on resources they will statistically never fully use, while systematically denying themselves and the people they love experiences and opportunities they can absolutely afford. Not because the money isn't there, because the fear never left. And this matters. It matters because deferred living has a price that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet. The trip not taken, the business not funded, the grandkids' education not contributed to, the years spent working past the point of necessity because stopping feels too dangerous. These are not free decisions. They are costs, invisible costs that get paid in time and joy and connection, the currencies that don't compound and cannot be recovered. The precaution here isn't spend more money. It's more specific than that. It's this. At least once a year, sit down and ask yourself a question that most Gen Xers have genuinely never asked. Ask, am I making this financial decision based on the situation I'm actually in, or the situation I was 20 years ago? Those are two completely different situations. And if you can't answer that question honestly on your own, find someone who can help you answer it. Not a salesperson, not a commission-hungry broker, a certified financial planner who is legally bound to act in your interest, or a financial therapist, or both. That combination, honest professional guidance, plus someone who understands the emotional architecture behind your money decisions can unlock more value than any investment strategy. Now let's talk about something that looks like wisdom, but is quietly one of the most expensive habits Gen X carries. They don't ask for help, and they've elevated not asking for help into a personal identity. This generation raised itself, latchkey kids who let themselves in after school and figured out dinner, young adults who entered the workforce without mentors, without anyone holding their hand, in an economy that told them clearly and repeatedly that they were on their own. And they adapted. They became fiercely, impressively self-sufficient. They learned to figure things out. They pride themselves on it. But self-sufficiency has a shadow side that doesn't get discussed in the same breath. When you run every financial decision through only your own brain, your own research, your own historical experience, you are operating inside a closed system. And closed systems, no matter how sophisticated, have a ceiling. They can only process the information they already have. They cannot see their own blind spots, because blind spots, by definition, are invisible to the person who has them. A 54-year-old man who has been managing his own investment portfolio for 20 years has learned a great deal. He has also made the same category of mistakes over and over again without knowing it, because nobody was looking over his shoulder to flag the pattern. He reinvests in familiar sectors because they feel safe, even when safer money is elsewhere. He stays too conservative too early, because the memory of 2008 is physically wired into him. He holds cash too long, because cash feels like control, even when it's silently being eaten alive by inflation. He misses entire windows of opportunity, not out of ignorance, but because of the invisible architecture of his own lived experience. The data on self-managed portfolios versus professionally advised ones is not flattering to the self-managed crowd. Studies consistently show that people who work with financial advisors, real fiduciaries, not salespeople, accumulate significantly more wealth over 20-year periods than people who go it alone, even when you account for the advisor's fee. The difference isn't investment genius, it's behavior management. An advisor doesn't just pick stocks. An advisor stops you from panic selling in a correction. An advisor asks the question you forgot to ask yourself. Gen X hates this finding. It feels like an attack on their competence. It isn't. The most capable surgeons in the world don't operate on themselves. The most gifted athletes in history have coaches. Getting a second brain on your most important decisions isn't weakness, it's leverage. And a generation that prides itself on being strategic should recognize leverage when it sees it. Here's another one that stings a little. Gen X's relationship with loyalty is costing them money. Not their disloyalty to employers. We talked about how they'll walk away from a job with no guilt, and that's actually healthy. but their fierce, stubborn, almost sentimental loyalty to brands, banks, financial products, and systems that have no loyalty to them at all. Think about the man who has been with the same bank since 1991, the same bank that has quietly raised his maintenance fees 4 times, the same bank that savings account currently pays a fraction of a % of interest, while high-yield accounts at competitor institutions are paying 4 or 5%. He knows this, by the way. He's not ignorant. He's looked it up. But switching feels wrong. The branch manager knows his name. He's been going there for 30 years. It feels disloyal. It feels like a betrayal of something. The bank is not loyal to him. The bank has no idea who he is except as a customer ID. The relationship he thinks he has is entirely in his head, but the money he's leaving on the table is entirely real. Run that loyalty across 30 years and multiple financial products. The high-fee mutual fund he's held since 1999 out of inertia.
Gen X understood this intellectually but often didn't act on it because the muscle memory of their parents' layoffs told them that stability at any price is better than the risk of something new. So they accepted the 3% annual raise year after year, grateful for the certainty, while their market value quietly compounded at a rate the company never matched. The precaution is simply this: audit your loyalty at regular intervals. Not your loyalty to people. People deserve loyalty. Audit your loyalty to institutions, products, systems, and companies that have no legal or emotional obligation to return it. Every 3 years, shop your banking, shop your insurance, look at your investment fee structures, have an honest conversation about your salary. The discomfort of those conversations is a one-time cost. The benefit compounds. Now here's the blind spot that very few people outside of behavioral finance even have language for, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Gen X prepared obsessively for disaster and forgot to prepare for success. Read that again. They built extraordinary defensive financial structures. They protected the downside with a thoroughness that would impress a military strategist, but a shockingly large number of them never built an offensive plan, never defined what winning actually looks like, never put a number on enough, never asked what the money is actually for beyond not running out of it. Ask a Gen Xer what they're saving toward and they'll tell you retirement. Ask what retirement looks like specifically with real numbers and real images and real plans for real days, and the answer evaporates. It becomes vague. Just being comfortable, having enough, not being caught out. Not being caught out is not a financial plan. It is a fear response wearing the clothes of a financial plan. And this creates a genuinely strange and painful situation that is playing out in thousands of Gen X households right now. Men who are objectively, measurably financially secure by any reasonable standard continue to feel the same baseline dread they felt in 2008, not because the numbers got worse, but because the numbers were never attached to any positive vision in the first place. The goal was always to avoid catastrophe, never to build a specific life, and you cannot ever feel like you've achieved a goal that was never defined. The research on this is clear and important. People who have a written, specific, positive financial vision, not just avoid disaster, but I want to retire at 62, travel 4 months a year, fund these 2 things I care about, live in this kind of house, give this amount to causes I believe in, consistently make better financial decisions, and report significantly higher life satisfaction and identical income and net worth levels compared to people without that written vision. Same money, wildly different emotional experience of that money. The wall Gen X built is real, and it is impressive, but a wall is not a destination. A wall is a boundary, and you cannot live inside a boundary forever without eventually confronting what you are actually protecting. The precaution: write down what flourishing looks like, not what survival looks like. You already know that in your bones. Write down what winning looks like. Give it real numbers, give it real images, give it timelines. Then build toward that, defend it, yes, but pursue it too. Because the only thing worse than not having enough money is having enough money and not knowing what it was ever for. There's one more thing we need to talk about, and it's the one Gen X will resist most. This generation is carrying a staggering amount of financial weight in silence, not for themselves, for everyone around them. Aging parents who need care and support, adult children navigating a housing and job market that is objectively brutal in ways Gen X's entry-level experience wasn't. They are being compressed from both sides and absorbing it without complaint, without transparency, without asking for help, because asking for help isn't in their DNA, and because they built the walls precisely so they'd never have to ask. The financial strain this creates is real and documented. The emotional strain of carrying it silently is harder to document, but just as real. The resentment that builds when sacrifice is invisible, the loneliness of being the one who holds everything together while nobody asks how you're doing. And here is the uncomfortable truth wrapped inside all of this. Gen X was told implicitly and explicitly by an economy and a culture that showed them no grace that needing help is the same as being weak, that silence is the same as strength, that holding it all together alone is the same as having it together. None of those things are true, but they were wired in deep, in the same decade that wired in everything else, and they've been running quietly on that programming ever since. The precaution here is the simplest and the hardest. Have the conversations, the ones that feel dangerous. Talk to aging parents about what the actual care plan looks like and what it will cost, and who is responsible for which parts of it. Talk to adult children about what support looks like and what it doesn't. Talk to a partner about the financial anxiety that wakes you up at 3 a.m. and hasn't been named out loud yet. Talk to a professional about whether what you're feeling matches what the numbers actually show. The armor served its purpose. It got an entire generation through things that would have leveled people with less resolve. But armor is not a permanent state. Armor is a tool for specific conditions, and some of those conditions have changed, even if the nervous system hasn't caught up yet. The generation that figured out how to survive everything now faces the question that survival never asks, but flourishing always does. What was all of this for? What do you actually want now that the danger has passed? What does a life built on all that discipline and resilience and sacrifice actually look like when you stop defending it and start living it? Because here's what I believe, and I mean this with full sincerity. Gen X deserves to find out. They did the work. They built the walls. They kept showing up even when the rules changed without warning and the floor dropped beneath their feet. They are, by almost any measure, the most quietly resilient financial generation of the last century. But surviving is not the same as living, and the most important financial upgrade Gen X can make right now isn't in their portfolio. It's in their relationship with the life the portfolio is supposed to be funding. Drop a comment right now and tell me, does any of this land? Are you Gen X nodding at the screen right now? Are you a millennial watching your dad in every word of this? Are you someone who finally has language for something you've been feeling for years but couldn't name? Tell me, drop it in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if this conversation matters to you, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the bell, because we go here. We go to the uncomfortable, honest, real conversations about money that everyone is thinking but nobody is saying out loud, and there is so much more to say. The walls were never the problem. The walls were the answer to the problem. The question now is whether you're still living inside a problem that already got solved.